Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on cybersecurity threats and mitigation practices. I'm Himanshu Saxena, and I'm delighted to have you all here today. This webinar is being organized on the occasion of World Telecommunication Day, which is celebrated every year on May 17th. The purpose of this day is to raise awareness of the possibilities that the use of the internet and other ICT technologies can bring to societies and economies, as well as ways to bridge the digital divide. However, as we embrace the benefits of ICT, we also face new challenges and risks in terms of cybersecurity. Cyber attacks are more frequent, sophisticated, and damaging, affecting individuals, businesses, governments alike. The importance of India's cybersecurity has grown year after year owing to the rising cyber threats, attacks on the country's governments, and critical infrastructure. The India cybersecurity market was worth USD 3.2 billion in 2023 and is expected to be worth USD 6.1 billion by 2029, growing at an impressive rate of double-digit CAGR during the forecast period. The increasing digital economy is driving the growth of the cybersecurity market. Again, if we look at the representation of the number of incidents handled by the Indian Computer Emergency and Response Team, you can clearly see that until 2019-20, there was a direct correlation and the dominance was of the unauthorized network scanning. However, the scene is swiftly changing by the year 2020 and 21, where virus and malicious codes are also appearing as the new segments for the cyber security. Again, as analyzed, network security led the market of cybersecurity in the year 2021 in terms of cyber security type and accounted for a share of roughly 24%, followed by the endpoint security. Increasing number of cyber attacks, data breaches, strict regulations, and compliance requirements are contributing to the growth of the segment. Also, rapid growth of cloud computing and IoT, increasing trend of bring your own device, besides rising need for secure communication are expected to contribute to the dominance of the segment in the following years. If we have to look at the number of cyber attacks incidents from different regions of the country, then Mumbai in west, Bangalore in south, Lucknow in north, and Patna in east accounted for the maximum cyber attack incidents in the past year. Again, does the future hold for cybersecurity in the coming years? First one is the 5G conundrum. See, the rollout of 5G promises to be transformative with unprecedented levels of speed, capacity, and potential. More than half of Indian enterprises want to start using 5G within the next 12 months or more than a year. 5G is expected to increase the adoption of IoT and industrial IoT, opening up organizations to more cyber risks than ever. Given how 5G will greatly contribute to the country's Make in India initiative aimed at boosting the manufacturing sector, the additional cyber risk posed by the 5G adoption is especially relevant in the industry environment. And later today, we have Sunil David with us to provide more insights on how 5G rollout is going to impact privacy protection for 5G enabled IoT. Consolidation, but not at all cost. The sheer cost of cybersecurity products covering different surface and use cases means that the customers are looking to consolidate when and where possible. With that said, there are many sides to consolidation. Security teams will not be satisfied with just buying more products from the same vendor or multiple vendor or pushing everything to one data lake. There will be demand, holistic workflows, unified agents, and cross-product synergies that actually deliver value that is greater than the sum of its part while consolidating around a platform. Demand for more vendor collaborations. As much as we expect consolidation, customers will always end up using more than one vendors. We have already seen security teams demanding more integration and more value from the collaborations between vendors. In 2023, this will range from a demand for integration across more types of use cases and standardization of data models to a very legitimate expectation that every new vendor will not only value on its own, but also help extract more value from the existing products in the security stack. Next one is data retention needs to be simplified and needs to be more affordable. SOCs will start looking for alternative solutions for analytics and data storage, which makes more sense in terms of cost, scale, performance, and ease of use. They'll start looking for improvements across the board from how we get the data in to how we can access historical data or how fragmented the data will be, and ultimately how much does it cost to the consumer. In the end, no one gets to out of cybersecurity in 2023. If there is one thing that we have learned in the past year, that no one is immune to cyber attacks. We have seen many breaches in 2022, which was far more better, which were far more deadlier than the cyber breaches that we have seen in the year 2021. The economic turmoil will pressure enterprises and organizations to save on costs and be more effective. As a result, we can expect more consolidation of pinpoint tools and teams and more utilization of growth and efficacy enablers like moving to the cloud. With less security budget, efficiency driven product will drive and the cost will become the main consideration for cybersecurity program. Again, like we have seen in the past year about the Cisco breach, it is enough to compromise the user to gain access to the entire network. With social networks, multitasking, and the evolution of device around us, it just makes sense for adversaries to keep investing in social engineering. Phishing is a problem that is not solved and will continue to be a leading factor in compromising identities, like we have seen in the case of the Cisco event. Deepfakes will improve social engineering. So, as we get better at defending the endpoints, threat actors will need to up their game in order to penetrate harder targets. Social engineering remains a popular vector of attacks, especially as workforce continue to remain decentralized and remote. No more hiding behind our Macs. See, this year just ended on something rare in the Mac OS. Threat landscape is very common these days. The inclusion of Mac payloads appearing in numerous cross platform attack frameworks. While this wasn't entirely unheard in the past, it was not the norm. And Mac payloads were generally poorly written, unreliable, and frankly, not that successful. What changed is the increasing popularity of two things: performative and stable cross platform languages like Go, Kotlin, and Rust, and Mac devices in the enterprises. Another trend that has gathered pace in the past year and is likely to continue this year as well is the reported number of CVEs for Mac OS devices, many of which allow privilege escalation and some of the ability to execute kernel code from user land processes. While a transparent bug reporting ecosystem is a good thing and long overdue regarding Apple operating systems, it has consequences for those that patch little and patch late. Without further ado, let me introduce you to our first speaker, Nilesh Sharma. Nilesh Sharma is a cybersecurity technocrat with over 15 years of experience as a cybersecurity manager. Currently working as senior manager cybersecurity with EY, he has led multiple identity and access management development and support projects with multiple IAM tools and technologies. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Himanshu, for the great introduction. So, as Himanshu, shared the states in terms of the security attacks or the, mishappening which has happened in the past across the India, right? After the COVID, what we have seen is a normal thing is we are adopting more and more technologies, and that's where the threat landscape is increasing, right? So it's not the question if we are getting attacked or not, right? Every business needs to think when they are going to get attacked, and that's where they should start preparing for all those basic consideration in terms of the cyber security for their organization to run the business, because cyber security is not just another vertical within the organization, right? It's a business driver. Until and unless you are protected from any situation, whether it is a natural calamity or the normal attacks, then you are not going to sustain your business, right? So it is very important to consider the security as a core within your business, and make sure your business is protected. So here in this particular presentation, I'm not going to talk in depth security attacks and how we can prevent them, but here I'm just going to talk about 10 important security parameters which can be considered. Those are the basic ones, and then we can protect our business, our organization in a good way, I would say. Yeah, Himanshu. Next slide. So the first one is the ransomware attacks. You all would have heard about it. One or another organization across the globe are getting attacked by this weapon being used by the attackers. And basically, what happens in this particular attack is attacker encrypts, files or the folders within the server or maybe the desktop sites, and post that they ask for the certain, ransom, right? Is a you know. Is a money or as an amount to unencrypt those files, right? But again, even after you pay that ransom to the attackers, you're not certain whether they are going to unencrypt your files or not, right? So rather than prepare for you know uh, getting attacked and then paying some ransom to get your files unencrypted, it's better to have some mitigation steps in place, right? So what are those mitigation steps? You guys can just regularly back up your critical data and store it offline, right? When I say offline, sometimes what happens is within the organizations, you have your data centers, and in data center itself you take the backup, and then again you take the backup tapes or the disks within that particular data center, right? So that shouldn't be the case. You should have those backups stored in the different places altogether, right? Which is reachable whenever there is a crisis within your organization. You can just go peek and then restore the data. That should be the way to go ahead with this particular regular backup, and store it in the offline places. Second one is you can implement robust endpoint protection solutions, right? And it detect whenever there is any situations which is not normal, right? The situation which is absolutely abnormal, which has not happened in the past. So you should have a robust endpoint protection systems which can observe, right? So when I say endpoint protection systems, it could be heuristic or the signature based, right? So sometime heuristic works very well in that particular situation, right? Because it have a certain trends within that particular system, and beyond that trends, if it observes different behavior altogether, then it can pick it up and then alert you, right? So that you can avoid that particular ransomware attacks within your organization. And the most important thing is training your employees within the organization, right? So what happens is you have all the tools and technologies to protect your organization, but the people working within the organization is not well aware how to leverage the technology and what are the precautions they need to carry forward as part of protecting their organization. As I said, security is not a responsibility of the C suite within the organization. It is a responsibility of everyone working for that organization, right? Because everybody is earning their bread and butter from that particular business or the organization. So we should have a robust training and awareness program for the users, so that they are well trained about the different situations, circumstances we can come across when any organization come across ransomware attack, right? And that will definitely help them protect their organization. Yeah, Himanshu, next slide. As we already talked about, Himanshu shared some states, right, in terms of phishing attacks or social engineering, right? So phishing attack is again, I would say, a part of that social engineering attack, right? So in phishing attacks, what happens is, they deceive users into revealing sensitive information, right? Attacker can, call anybody, right, on their mobile phone. They can text, right, and they can ask for certain sensitive information which can help them to penetrate their system and do the suspicious activity that within that particular system, right? So how anybody can avoid that particular situation and come out of the phishing scam? So they can implement email filters to block the suspicious emails, right? If you don't have the email filtering systems, all normally all the email service providers, they do have their own whitelisting, blacklisting system within the email systems, right? So we need to be well versed what are the domain we have whitelisted to come through the emails across, and based on that we can leverage that particular feature within the email system we are using, right? We can also, as I said in previous slide, that we should conduct proper security awareness training for employees so that they can recognize all these phishing emails, right? And as part of the training and awareness session, we can also share some simple mails frequently, right? It could be 15 days, fortnightly, or maybe the monthly, so that you get to understand how much employee within your organization is well trained to identify this kind of phishing schemes or emails coming across, right? And based on that you can have some reward sort of plan, just to motivate the people within the organization, to motivate on the security initiatives to protect their organization. We can also have multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication implemented within the organization, which is again going to provide another layer of defense to protect from all this phishing scam or social engineering. Yeah, yeah, Manshu. Most of you would have heard about this zero-day exploit, right? And what it means is, what happens is, in every and any software product can have certain vulnerabilities within that particular software, and that is known to the vendors, right? And most of the times, what happens is, we do have white hat hackers, gray hat hackers, and red hat hackers, right? So red hat hackers are basically the bad guy attackers, we can call it. Uh, and the white hat hacker is someone working for an organization to protect the organization. But this great hit hackers are someone who's not bad guy and who's not good guy as well, right? So what they do is they keep penetrating different organizations softwares or things like that, and whenever they identify any vulnerabilities within any specific application for any organization, they basically intimate the vendors or the organization that they have identified certain vulnerabilities which can be leveraged by the red hat hacker, who are the attackers actually. And they can leverage that to penetrate or attack the organization. And based on that particular information they share with the organization or with the software vendor, they expect some rewards, right? It could be monetary benefit or it could be anything, right? And if they do not get that particular monetary benefit or whatever motive they have to share that particular information with the software vendor or the organization, in that situation what they do is they publicly publish that particular vulnerabilities on the internet, right? And that is the time from where red hat hacker can pick it up and then try to penetrate that particular software or maybe the organization for which that particular vulnerability has been identified, right? So in that situation, what we can do is, as a mitigation, we can keep our software or the operating system up to date with the latest patches. It doesn't mean that vendor launches the patches, you just go ahead and deploy on the production systems. Definitely, you need to go through some test development environment and then production, just to make sure that that particular patches does not have any impact on your business or the production environment. So you definitely need to follow the certain practices to deploy the patches, but most of the times you should be n minus one, right, in terms of the patches to protect your organization. So that is a mitigation steps I would like to suggest here. Another one is we can have intrusion detection and prevention system, right? Again, we do have IDS IPS systems. Those are signature based and heuristic based. Heuristic is nothing but the behavior based, right? So we need to have those sort of systems within the organization which can understand or learn the patterns within the organization, and in case that patterns gets breached, then that system alerts to the security team or the system admin within that organization to take the certain steps to protect the organization, right? Along with that, we can also have some vulnerability management tools in place to make sure that we have a regular scan within the organization, right? We should not just rely on the great hat hacker or the vendor to provide the patches. We should be little proactive and scan our environments, right, to make sure that there is no vulnerabilities within the systems or the softwares being leveraged within the organization, and apply the appropriate patches, right? So that will help you to mitigate the issues related to the zero-day exploit. Yeah, Himanshu. Next one is social engineering, which manipulates the individual to gain unauthorized access, right? So we have already talked about in the phishing, most of the things. But again, as a mitigation step for the social engineering, we can go ahead with user training and awareness program, and make them aware what those social engineering could look like, right? And based on that, they would be smart enough to protect their own organization, right? We can also have proper access control systems, right? We can go with the role-based access control, or we can also look for the attribute-based access control to have a granular level of control within the organization, and we do not provide additional access to the individuals who do not need that level of access, right? So we can leverage access control systems and authentication systems to protect our organization from limiting the social engineering, right? Another last pointer over here is we can have a regular security awareness training and phishing simulation, right? As I said, we can send regular mails or some sort of luring emails to the employees to make sure that we do not lose the track, and we make sure that the employees are trained about the social engineering. Next one is insider threats involve malicious action by the employee or trusted individual. So what happens is there are different kind of human working for an organization, and some disgruntled employee who is not happy with the management, or due to the some rewards he or she is not getting, or due to some revenge, they can take different path altogether, and they could be a threat for the organization, right? So in order to control those disgruntled employed within the organization, what we can do is, again, we can leverage the strong authentication and access control system, and we can have a role-based access control and list privilege principles implemented within the organization. And whenever if any admin or super user needs additional privileges, then we can just grant for that particular interval for which they need that level of access, right? We should not give them the high level of privilege and just leave it to do whatever they want to do, right? So we can have a proper role-based access control or list privilege principles in place implemented for the organization. Next one could be we can have a proper SIEM tool, or maybe the proper logging and monitoring mechanism within the organization. Those features are available within the organization, but unfortunately we do not uh, look for those logs or patterns, right, to detect the anomaly, right, within the organization. That is another issue. So we should change the way we work now. We should be very proactive to monitor who is doing what, considering we are do not losing, or we are not breaching the PII, right? Personal identifiable information or whatever. If you are doing that, you have a right level of consent from the user while you monitor the activities of certain users, right? We can also have a regular review and update access permission based on job roles and responsibilities. For this, we can use the identity governance and administration tools, which will provide you the facility to recertify the users, right? So in organization, what happens is anybody joins as a network admin, take an example, and then after certain years, maybe 1 years, 2 years, they switch their jobs to the maybe the database admin or maybe the server admin, right? In that situation, what happens is access gets accumulated, right? So we should not give all sort of access to any individual if they do not need it, right? So in order to prevent that, what we can have a access reviews in place, and we can simplify that by using the identity governance and administration tools. And then we can have a manager or maybe the application owner level of access reviews very frequently based on the need of an organization. It could be quarterly, half yearly, or maybe the yearly, right? So we can go ahead with that and protect our organization. Yeah, Himanshu. Again, the important topic nowadays is Internet of Things, right? Where we have smart devices in our home, in our offices, right? Specifically, when I talk about these smart devices are not basically designed for the internet purpose, or using the major technologies, right? So in terms of that, they are not that secure, right? They have a weak security altogether, right? And what happens is, whenever we have those smart devices at our home, we do not try to configure them to make it strong, right? We basically use the same default configuration, maybe username admin and password admin, or the password 123 sort of configuration, right? So that would be, very difficult situation for any organization or the individual using smart devices on their home, right? So basically what they should do is, they should choose the IoT devices based on the security. They can go and have some review, right, on the internet. Every information is available on the internet, and they can choose the vendor who is providing regular updates and have certain level of security on those IoT devices. And once that devices is in office, or maybe in home, then we should have a proper configuration to make them strong enough, right? In organization, I would suggest all those internet of things devices should be uh, I would say separated in a different network altogether, right? They shouldn't be the part of production network, right? To make sure that we have limited the attack surface from the IoT devices. So as I said, we can change the default username and password on the IoT devices to make them more secure. We can also segment the IoT devices from the critical network infrastructure or the production network infrastructure, and we can also look for the regular update specific to the firmware, and apply security patches to make them secure, right? So that would be the mitigation I would suggest here. Yeah, next slide. As we all know, right, in most of the organization now, we are moving towards a cloud environment from the traditional data center approach, right, on-premise approach. And due to that, again, cloud vendor provides all the secure security within their product or applications, right? But due to lack of knowledge, or due to misconfiguration on those cloud services being opted by the organization, we leave the things as is, right, or the default. And due to that, many data breaches has happened in the past, right? So in order to avoid that situation, first of all, we need to educate our IT team or the security team to make sure they know the product very well, and they try to secure the application, or maybe the systems within that particular cloud environment, right, to avoid data breaches or the security breaches, right? In order to do that, what we can do is we can have a secure encrypted data, right, before we store it in the cloud, right? We can implement multi-factor authentication for cloud access, right? We should not allow anybody and everybody to do whatever they want, right? We should have a proper authentication and authorization mechanism in place, supported by multi-factor authentication, right? We can again regularly monitor and audit what's happening in the cloud environment, right? And as part of that, as I said, we can have a regular vulnerability assessment, which can again detect the misconfiguration within the cloud environment, right? And when we follow these basic steps within the cloud environment, we can protect data breaches or the security breaches, right? And yeah, help organization to proceed further. Yeah. Again, as we talked about the cloud environment, and our approach towards moving on the cloud environment, as we said, data breaches or which compromises sensitive information, leading to the financial and reputational damages. When I say financial damages, right, most of the organizations are following certain regulation or the compliance requirement, right? And if you do not obey the certain policies within those regulatory or compliance requirement, then you are answerable to the regulatory and compliance organization, right? And in that situation, you are going to definitely have some sort of penalties which you need to pay to those, and maybe you can get those certifications, or maybe the compliance requirement, whatever has been approved by those regulatory and compliance requirement, you can lose that certificate or association as well, right? And other than that, you are also going to lose your reputational damage in the marketplace, right? Because you have been breached the data, right? So in order to avoid all the situations, we can go ahead with again encrypting sensitive data, both at rest and transit, right? So when I say rest, whenever you are storing, and if you are not using the data, make sure that you have a right encryption with the right key, right? And while transit as well, you need to make sure that you are using the data, right? Okay, rest transport and security. So the whole idea behind this particular discussion is, those are the basic attacks most of the organization come across very often, right? So in order to avoid those particular situations, we can just follow the basic steps, and go ahead and increase the security within the organization and continue our business in the marketplace. Yeah, thanks, Himanshu.
Thank you, Nilesh, for telling us about different kinds of cyber attacks and the phishing formats and what are the different mitigations to combat that.
Yeah.
Second speaker for the event is Harsh Kaur. With career spanning a decade, Harsh Kaur is currently working as regional account manager with Trend Micro. She held multiple positions throughout her career as customer relationship manager, OEM partner engagement, and among others. Also, she is one of the founding members of Cyber Gurukul, and she is the last recent recipient of her Rising Women Professional Award in 2022. Welcome, Harsh.
Thank you so much, Himanshu. That's definitely a warm welcome, and really excited to share, my part of the story. But Nilesh, I think you really did a very good job in decoding the cyber threats and the road ahead. So thanks so much for that as well. Looking
Sure.
forward to also learn from the other esteemed speakers. So yes, now that we have understood, the kind of cyber threats we have, I think each one of us realize that we are under this waves of a perfect storm. So how do we rise above it? That's the reason I think Himanshu has arranged this session, right? And that's where we are going to reimagine cybersecurity. Definitely, why is almost the most important question, and that's the reason. Let me reiterate the story that Himanshu and briefly Nilesh has also covered. CPC, especially the last 3 4 years, this is the modern era, the era of explosive growth. This is the period where we have seen digitization promoting unity, promoting inclusiveness, because now more than 75% of the population stream online, almost 6 billion people, and it is plusing, of course, for their personal or professional activity. 66% of the enterprises today are embracing cloud, not only to scale, to speed for their operational efficiency, but also for the business transformation projects itself. Yes, now there are times that organizations can say that they can, have their project live in 30 days, or maybe, they can definitely balance that user productivity, security experience kind of a dilemma. So that is the period we are living in. But yes, with the boon comes the bane. This rapid digitization and the blind spots has also been leveraged, has been exploited by the cyber criminals. I think Himanshu has already explained quite in a detail how cyber crimes have evolved. It's no more just an organized business. It has become a whopping $6 trillion economy in itself, and this is a 2021 figure. It is going to become 10 billion, trillion very soon. You know what this means? Today, cyber crimes is a third largest economy after US and China. This is much more disastrous than major of the natural disasters. It's the biggest human-induced threats as per World Economic Forum, even more profitable than a lot of drug trade businesses. So this is the grim reality that we are talking about. And with this grim reality comes those modern complexities and the burden of 4S, the skill shortage, siloed visibility, stricter compliances, and the sophisticated threats. I can see Himanshu smiling, so the purpose is achieved. Yes, we are talking a very stressful story, but sometimes we should not always fear these threats. We also need to get a little, lighten up with this emotions of Mr. Bean. I think that definitely does the justice, right? And some of us are in a second category also of Mr. Mir. I will very soon coming up to who is Mr. Mir. So let's keep that aside for a minute. But then a lot of us are those infosec professionals who are daily bombarded with 10,000 of alerts with about 10 to 30 false positives. Why? Because there are 16 to 40 security tools that we have to manage. So this is the kind of times that we are living in. With every problem, we have brought one product, which is the right start. But how do we go ahead? Is what we will be discussing in detail in just few seconds. Yes. Of course, I think Nilesh has also quite a lot reiterated that this story needs to change, right? That's the reason the security professional and business leaders, all of us, are here. We are interested with the responsibility to reconstruct this cybersecurity strategy. And like Nilesh mentioned, make it proactive. So for that, I think one silver lining to this dark cloud, of course, is why cybersecurity and its impact is no more a question. Whether you talk about being a business enabler, the financial impact, the business continuity, the goodwill, etc. Right? But yes, Delhi abhi dur hai, right? The what and how is equally critical part, and that is what we'll be digging deeper into. One way, of course, is treating compliances not just as a tick mark, but a valuable business practices. Maybe all of us can decode few cornerstones from these compliances. Let us take the example of last year's CERT India compliance, which again my esteemed speakers and Himanshu has already referred. We are here to bring about those information security practices, prevention, kind of those reporting model that can ensure a safe and trusted internet. Himanshu has already mentioned, how India has become that next target for the cyber attacks, right? Because we are a digital economy, we need that level of cyber shield, and that's the reason the CERT India guideline does gives us those lot of cornerstones. In interest of time, I'll not go through the whole story, but yes, few cornerstones for me is map, measure, and mitigate those cyber threats. So how do we do it? Now, the first part, for example, the CERT India guidelines mention that you need to enable the logs of all ICT, your systems, your devices. I'm sure IoT OT is a story that Sunil will do a better job, so I'll not get into that. We need to have that enabled for rolling period of 180 days in the Indian jurisdiction. Why is that required? One of the important reason is so that we can complete the attacks. We have that complete attack story across your ICT ecosystem. This will be the reactive. This is the first step. Then we will go step by step ahead. We will also be able to digital, map that digital risk profile that we talk about. We can discuss in detail about this a little later, but yes, that's one of the important start. Then measure. Today we talk about how we can translate this cyber security risk to that business risk. For that, we will have to get that business language and metrics. Can the technology enable us to quantify the cyber risk? 5 years back, when a lot of my friends used to ask this, I think that was not a reality, but today it is. We can measure the cyber risk according to that business criticality, according to the threat severity, and we can prioritize those threats. And of course, mitigation. I think Nilesh has covered quite a bit in detail. So in terms of the product mitigation, I think I will leave it to Nilesh and those takeaways that I've also taken. But at the same time, what we are now doing is, and maybe I'm getting a little ambitious, but I believe in it, is trying to create Netflix of the cybersecurity world. So what are we going to do here? We have already heard from Nilesh the different kind of threats and mitigation, antivirus for the known threats, then going to the EDR and covering those zero-day exploits and signature-less threats, right? Now, what we are also saying is that this detection and response now has to extend to rest of the IT components, your email, your network, your cloud, of course, and all those digital native ecosystem also that we talk about. And that is how in last 3 years, this buzz for the XDR, extended detection and response has come up. We need to be proactive. To do that, we now also need to move from that product story to the platform story. I again reiterate, product is the first layer of the building, but there are multiple other layers also. We today need to have that multi-vector and a multi-layer defense strategy. And that is what this XDR story talks about. So I was going to talk about Mr. Mir. So let me take his example and explain this. So Mr. Mir is actually the 4-year-old nephew of mine. You can see he's a very adorable, cute one over here. And that is how a lot of us feel in this industry, right? A lot of the way the industry has evolved, the threats has evolved. We have not been able to upscale and rescale to that level, and that's the reason the technology also has to enable us for that. It needs to help us to kind of integrate not only the tools, the tool communication, but also integrate that complete attack story, because attack don't stays in silos, and nor should we. So of course the first layer is the XDR layer that we talk about, the detection and response at each and every component that we talk about, we also need to have that defense in depth in action, right? So for that, there are some other layers also to it. The first layer will be the XDR layer. The second layer, to top it up, because we have to collect the data, we have to analyze it, we the logs and everything, and we have to convert that alerts to that attack story. We require a security analytics and intelligence kind of an engine. I think Prashast is going to cover quite a detail on the SOAR and the XDR driven SOC. I'm sure you'll cover that as well, so I'll leave it to him over there. But yes, along with that, what else do we require? How do we simplify, integrate, and automate the system? We need to have some consolidated policy and posture management kind of layer as well. Let me take a very small example over here. We do talk about zero trust being a replacement to the castle and moat architecture, right? It's not a plug and play product. It's a step by step journey, how we embed it into our product policies. But what if we can, instead of doing it every product, we can put it at the platform? So you can understand the kind of effectiveness and simplicity it can bring. That's the kind of journey most of us are talking about now and planning to kind of move it to that. We also need those kind of console which can integrate with multiple other product console, get that one bird's eye view of what is happening across your enterprise. And of course, also the integration is the key. I think Himanshu did mention about the vendor collaboration. So we also need to share those IOCs or the IOAs to the rest of your you can say the vendors or rest of the security tools that you will have. Why? Because that's how you can get, for example, that enterprise risk core or the risky users that you may have. That consolidated dashboards is what we require today, right? So that is equally critical, portion in that. And of course, this will help us to do what we are supposed to do: pitch, prioritize, and protect. Get that whole detailed RCA, which email, which endpoints has been affected. At the end, the security tools are for two purpose. If the attack has happened, by that whole detailed RCA, and how do we prevent, detect, and respond to it, right? So in terms of the RCA, where, how, that whole kill chain, the attack path, which users have got infected, you need that story. You need to know, what kind of threat has come up, at what stage it is, what is the severity. If you go, a doctor is there, he has one patient who has heart attack and the other one has a scratch, who should you prioritize? I think that is also critical over here. And of course, according to the business impact, what is the objective? Why are we doing this whole exercise? Let's always stay true to the spirit and the objective. And from this RCA, reach the road ahead. From that multiple alerts, get that one attack, unified attack story. Can we simplify and story tell what the kill chain is, what is happening? So kill chain visualization is a reality today. We can discuss some other time also about this. Cyber risk quantification, threat prioritization, all of this is today a reality with a platform story. And for that, from this product to platform story is equally critical, so that we can align with the business objectives, with the business stakeholders, that language, that metrics. So I think with this, I have covered my part, and thank you so much for Himanshu and everyone here for being so patient. And I'll, love to listen to the thoughts and insights of other speakers as well.
Yeah, thank you, Harsh. The presentation was really quirky and interesting, to say the least. And again, it was very informative as well. We got to know a lot about the cybersecurity and related things. Moving on, Precious Baliga, our other speaker for the today's webinar is Precious Baliga. He's currently working with Palo Alto Networks, a cybersecurity manager, assisting customers across Asia Pacific, Europe, and Middle East and Africa regions. With prior experience in multiple cybersecurity organizations, Mr. Baliga has taken on various roles related to anti-DDoS products, firewall, parameter protection, security orchestration and automation, vulnerability analysis, as well as IoT security. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Himanshu. Thanks for this opportunity. And that was really great insights from Nilesh and Harsh. And first of all, I apologize if there's some sort of noise here because there's a lot of thunderstorm in Singapore today. So Apologies for that. Well, today's topic is on security automation. I'm going to give a quick intro and a briefing about it because these days you guys might be hearing a lot about AI, chat GPT, bard, and automation, right? We are not spared from that as well. So let's get straight away into the security automation. Next slide, please. Yeah, quick intro. Well, I'm a cybersecurity manager handling the global team of, we call it as customer success here at Palo Alto Networks, and I'm based out of Singapore. Like I've been in this industry for past 8 years, mostly specialized in the area of security automation. So I'm going to share my insights on why automation can play a major role in handling all the security threats and the alerts, right, which were discussed previously. I'm going to share how we can work on that. So, as for the benefit of the user, for the viewers here, right? So, if you ask me about the SOC setup these days, right? There are like hundreds of tools available. If you'd ask me, like on a bird's eye view from a 10,000 feet above, I would say the major tools being like your SIM, like I'm sure you guys might have heard of, like Splunk or your QRadar. Not endorsing any of them, but just trying to say the most famous ones. Be it for firewall, like Palo Alto firewall or Checkpoint firewalls, you have your data loss protection tools, the traditional IDS, IPS, or your sandboxing tools like Cuckoo or Joey Sandbox, even your the identity access management tools. You might be using Okta or email security, right? There was a query saying like, how do you detect your phishing emails? Yes, there are tools for that as well these days. Of course, you can use email security tools even. And Harsh went through the XDR portion of it, right? You have your EDRs and XDRs, be it your CrowdStrike or even Palo Alto for that reason. And of course, you have your various threat intel platforms like VirusTotal, Recorded Future, and these days, of course, cloud is something inevitable. Everyone is moving towards it, which absolutely requires your security element. We have your CSPM tools like Palo Alto Networks, Prisma Cloud, or Wiz, or I believe even Zscaler in that aspect. So a lot of tools, right? Again, every tool is great in this aspect, doing what they're supposed to do. And but the end result is like you get a lot of alerts. There's no centralized management out of it, and you get a hell lot of alerts, which is not possible to keep track in a sane way, right? Because in a SOC, possibly you might have like very few resources, but they have to go through all these alerts, and the chances of someone missing out on any of the alerts is very common, and which can end up in a data breach, right? If you go to the next slide, and if you ask me the challenges what they are facing, yes, there are a lot of tools which do an amazing work. They are going to throw a lot of alerts, but now what are the challenges which the organization fails? Well, first and foremost is the overwhelming number of alerts, right? Like each one of them can possibly raise like tens or hundreds of alerts on a day-to-day basis. So monitoring each one of them is practically not possible, and which would automatically result in increased probability of missing an alert. And you can't miss out on any of the alerts, right? Because it would end up in a data breach. You never know. Also, the slow response due to lack of standardized response capabilities. See, every one of us are different, right? Every one of us have got different skill set. Every one of us have got their own ways of handling the alert. Even if you get like 10 experts in your SOC center, again, there is a chance that let's say the analyst might be facing some sort of a issue at his home, let's say, or let's say today it's raining here, my mood is completely low here today, so maybe my way or my approach of handling the alert might be different from my other folks who are possibly doing much better than me today, right? So there's no consistent or a standardized process here followed. Now the fourth one being like wasting resources or your time on manual inefficient processes. So when you say of security, there's a lot of things which goes manually. Like let's say you get an IOC, which is your indicator of compromise, right, in your email. So what the analyst usually does is tries to do the copy paste work and tries to find the score of it, whether it's a malicious or not. So just imagine multiplied by hundreds of emails, Excel sheets. There's a lot of things which has a manual effort involved, which is boring, right? I personally like something where I can automate everything, um, and just do something else in my life, right? Like I can go out and just have a coffee rather than doing the manual copy paste work. So a lot of time is getting wasted there. Difficulty finding the security people the right skill set. Again, this is not just with the SOC, but with any aspect of security, right? You don't have people at all. As far as what I've heard recently was like around like 4 million or 5 million jobs available in cybersecurity across the world. And if you speak about Indian market itself, I am seeing a huge boom in the market, because a lot of stock is getting moved from different other countries to India because of the resources available. So we have got a lot of talent pool in our country in India. That's a huge boost for our economy as well in that case. So definitely a great benefit as well. But again, that's also a difficulty, right? Finding the right skill set. And finally, lack of visibility or limited visibility across the tools. So the central management, like I said, you have got hundreds of tools, but you don't have any system which will go through all these tools. So that is one of the reason, and the solution for that we thought was security automation. And if you get into the security automation, it can be just be your normal Python scripts or your JavaScript. But if you want to ask about a framework, I will introduce you to a framework called as SOAR. It's called Security Orchestration, Automation, and Response. Just like how SIM is there, you have a SOAR. What makes SOAR unique is it is mostly into the remediation part rather than the detection part. Most of the tools handle into the detection, which is doing an amazing work, but the SOAR does the remediation part or the automation or the orchestration part of it, right? So I would classify it into three pillars: orchestration, automation, and response. Orchestration is basically the engine or the heart of the machine, where what it tries to do is it tries to go and connect with all the other third party tools. Like you have so many tools, right? So the orchestration engine will go and connect with all the third party tools using APIs. The automation segment here is basically dealing with your playbooks, like your investigation playbooks, or any sort of automation, right? Your scripts, your manual effort, which can be mapped to a Python script, or your commands that can be automated. And the third part is, of course, the remediation part, which is the major part, because here it's not just about doing some sort of investigation, but also automatically going and blocking the IOCs or sending an email to the management or creation of the reports. Everything can be automated, but of course it has to be improvised. It's not something that you go and deploy the tool and automatically it's going to do all the things for you. No, at the end of the day, it's the analyst who will go and basically fine tune the tool and utilize it for his or her benefit, right? So that is all about the SOAR, like three pillars: orchestration, automation, and response. We can go ahead for the next one. And if you'd ask me, like on a high level view, right, like how it looks like, SOAR basically goes and connects with your, be it your network, threat intel, mobile devices, endpoint, basically any tool in the world which has got an API access. The SOAR can go and connect. And I'm not just speaking about security here. If you want to connect with your Twitter, for example, you can do that. You want to connect with your communication tools like Slack, Teams, Zoom, right? You can do that. Not just that, even your case management tool. Every one of us uses like your ServiceNow or your Jira, right? Even that is possible. So basically, any tool which has got an access for API, the SOAR can go and connect it, right? So basically, if you again see in the right hand side, it connects with your SIM tools like ArcSight, QRadar, Splunk. And if you see, the arrow mark is a bidirectional. So it's not just getting the alerts from these tools, but it's also going and remediating it. So basically, it's just both bidirectional. So if you ask me, like I said, everything can be automatically handled, but we also recommend to basically handle it in a semi-automated fashion, where 75% is automated and 25% is, of course, given to the control of the analyst to oversee the activities what is happening in the automated fashion, right? So through this way, we should be able to handle most of the threats which has been like happening in the organization through this SOAR tool. And if you'd ask me, like, what is the life cycle of it, um, again, when you say of SOAR or any sort of automation tool, right, it is going to reduce your work. It is going to reduce your what do you say, the effort involved. So again, most of the time goes into the planning. Once you get into the planning phase and finish all the planning, you define the incident, you do the one-to-one mapping with your manual efforts, and again you perform your pre-processing. Basically, you try to see if there's any duplication which can automatically be removed. And finally, you run a playbook. It can both be your investigation as well as your remediation playbook, right? And finally, you do your post-processing, which is your post-mortem of the incident. Once you have finally remediated the incident, what is the insights you're going to take out of this incident? Do you want to close the ticket? Do you want to send a report? Do you want to send an email? All these things, again, can be completely be performed in this SOAR platform. Next one. Yeah. Finally, if you'd ask me, like, what are the benefits, I would say there are a lot of benefits. Again, I'm touching only on the high level aspect due to the paucity of the time. 90% reduction in the remediation time, right? Rather than doing manually, everything can now be automated, and 89% reduction in the time spent in investigating the malware incidents, which is one of the major incidents, right? And even for phishing, we have seen that almost 75 to 80% of the time is reduced. And finally, I would say like 75% fewer incidents requiring the manual interaction. So you can basically take a gist of it, like how beneficial the security automation can result in reducing your alerts. And of course, with the recent advent of like your chat GPT or your bard, you can even automate those platforms. We have already automated. And finally, you can take the benefit, and not just in the detection but also in the remediation process of it. So that is a high level introduction to security automation, and I hope it will be beneficial. Thank you.
Thank you, Precious, for your words on the. Moving on to Sunil David. Sunil David has over 30 years of experience in IT and telecom industry, with almost 20 years spent with AT&T. He is the former regional director of IoT India Asian for AT&T India, and has served as NESCOM IoT Tech Group for W2R. Currently, he is working as independent consultant, manufacturing and process consulting practice area at Frost and Sullivan, India. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Himanshu, and good afternoon to all those who joined us virtually. A warm welcome to all my other panelists. Wishing all of you all a very happy World Telecommunications Day. Having worked in the telecom industry for almost 25 years, really be proud to be associated with an industry that has a tremendous impact on communities, on enterprises, and society at large. Now, the topic that I've chosen to cover is can you go back to the previous slide, please? The topic that I've chosen to cover is security and privacy protection for 5G enabled Internet of Things. I think a very, very contextual topic, because we've seen the launch of 5G in India about 7 months back, and that is definitely going to trigger and propel IoT adoption in a big way. Next slide, please. So what I want to do is, over the next 15 odd minutes, um, at a very high level, cover what is the kind of cyber landscape that we are seeing today, what are the factors that are adding to the complexity, some notable attacks that have taken place over the last 2 years, some of the trends that we need to watch out for this year, and then get to the real meat, which is all about how 5G and IoT can impact industry. What is the kind of security approach one needs to take? It obviously it would need a very holistic approach when it comes to security. And I would conclude by talking about the need for organizations to have a security first mindset. Next slide, please. Right. Now, if you just look at how the risks have evolved over the last a decade or so, in the past, we've seen PC LAN servers being attacked. Most of the threats were from viruses and worms. Today, we are seeing pretty much every attack surface, whether it's mobile, web, cloud. Uh, you find very, very frequent DDoS attacks. Phishing, we already spoke about before. Ransomware was very, very common over the last few years. And even now, it's a major threat. Now, what we're going to see tomorrow, what we're seeing tomorrow is that the threats obviously are getting a lot more sophisticated, right? And we're actually seeing that even now. And this will get even more dangerous going forward, because while we have all this great technology like AI, ChatGPT, those are actually used by hackers now. For example, you can actually have ChatGPT generate code to trigger a cyber attack. You find some of the data sets which are used in AI being poisoned, and that can give you completely irrational output, right? So the hackers are also getting one step ahead by using all these great technologies to really create a larger impact, right? So we talk about frictionless, right? So all of us want one-click ordering, but that convenience comes at a cost, and hence the need for organizations or people to even look at two-factor authentication, right? So those become important. We're seeing cyber attacks for physical harm, and especially operational technology environments getting very, very largely impacted. We've seen, I'm going to share some examples of how a few organizations, their OT environments were largely impacted, and that has had an impact on their revenue and profitability. Now, talking about what are we going to see tomorrow, what are the challenges that we are going to face, both from an individual perspective as well as from an organization perspective. Harsh talked about security posture, right? So, what is security posture? It is to assess the readiness of an enterprise from a cybersecurity perspective. Um, the level of visibility that you have as far as your asset inventory is concerned, your attack surface is concerned, it is the organization's ability to detect and contain attacks, and also very importantly, to have the ability to react and recover from security events, and also the kind of automation that you have in your security program. So Prashant talked about automation before, but it's extremely important to maintain that proper security posture. And now I'm not going to go into all these challenges, but we are seeing as we have physical assets connecting to the internet, and as IoT grows, that's going to generate humongous amount of data, and 5G is going to be one of those catalysts which will trigger all this, right? So as you're going to deal with so much of data, huge bursts of workloads, how are organizations going to cope with all that? So that's going to be a major challenge that we need to address. Next slide, please. Now, having talked about all those, what are the factors that are adding complexity, right? So, we've seen this whole remote and mobile workforce, especially triggered by COVID. Um, uh, the earlier presentations, you spoke about the gap that we have from a cybersecurity perspective. There's huge demand for cybersecurity skills, and today, India, the country, is not producing enough people with cybersecurity skills. We're seeing these issues and divergences in regulations in the environment and the geography, right? So while Europe is very well covered by GDPR, India is still not yet having the Data Protection Act yet. So that's work in progress. But each country have got their own regulations in terms of how where data is stored, how is it processed, how is consent taken from individuals in terms of how data is handled. So these are the kind of divergence that exist. And also, digital transformation has really got accelerated over the last 2 to 3 years, right? So we've seen a lot of organizations move their applications to the cloud. We have hybrid environments, and as we accelerate digital transformation, the threat surface has widened. And how do you address that? That's going to be critical. Cyber crime has increased. Harsh talked about 6 trillion was the crime in 2021, and the estimate is that it may probably touch 10 trillion in the next couple of years. So I think what is very important is for organizations to understand that cyber crime is not their core competence, right? They need help, they need people, they need the right level of skills within the organization, they need good partners, they need consultants to really help them, because we need that whole ecosystem to come together. All stakeholders have to come together to address this, not just within the country, but also the need for countries to cooperate to address this global problem. Can I move to the next slide, please? Now let's look at some of the big attacks that happened over the last few years, right? So all of you all are familiar with the SolarWinds cyber attack, right? So SolarWinds makes a network management software called Orion, and that network management software is deployed by thousands of enterprises in the US, and including some government agencies. And here, what the hackers did is they targeted SolarWinds by deploying malicious code. It's one of the worst supply chain attacks that has ever happened. Colonial Pipeline, they are an American company. This happened in May 2021. They carry gasoline and jet fuel from the Texas to southeastern Europe, and they eventually had to pay almost 5 million ransomware to be able to get the hackers to kind of decrypt their files. Another example which I wanted to cite, again, this is a supply chain. Previous slide. Toyota. Toyota actually had to suspend operations at 14 plants in Japan. And you know why? Because their a supplier of components to Toyota, Kojima Industries, they had a supply chain, they had an attack, cyber attack. And because of that, Toyota, and because the supply chain systems were all integrated, uh, Toyota had to shut down their plants in 14 locations, and that means a revenue loss. And this year in India, you all know of the attack which happened on Sun Pharma, so much so that the attack was so severe that Sun Pharma actually had to lower their guidance for the next coming quarters. So that's the impact. Next slide, please. Now, some of the trends that we need to watch out for in 2023, I'm not going to go through all of them because some of them have been covered by the earlier speakers. I just wanted to highlight two things here, right? First thing, that the whole cyber warfare is now state sponsored, right? So it is just not hackers, hacktivists doing it, but countries are now targeting other countries. We've seen what happened in Ukraine, where Russia was a lot of the attacks originated from Russia. And the second trend which I wanted to call out is IoT with 5G networks, and that is where I'm going to focus a little bit more going forward, because as 5G adoption picks up, as we see more IoT endpoints being connected to the network, the threat surface is going to get all the more widened, and that would mean a lot more assets which are exposed to the internet. That means a lot more risks. So the question is, how do you address that? Next slide, please. Right, now if you just look at 5G as a technology, now if all the previous generations of technologies, right from 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, were all about faster data speeds, right? So all of you will recollect when you all moved to 5G, you started to consume a lot more video, right? So 4G triggered a lot more video consumption. Now 5G is just not about faster data speeds. 5G is also about trying to alter the DNA of the user experience, right? So when I talk about 5G, I coined one equation, and that is superior user experience is equivalent to very high data rates, very, very low latency, very, very high capacity, and extremely high reliability. Okay, let me just stress upon each of these four. Now, first thing is your speeds in 5G are going to be 400 megabits per second and higher. I don't know how many of you are using 5G, but if you'll do a speed test, your speeds will probably be about 400 Mbps or even higher. Second thing is it's 99.59 reliability, extremely reliable. So which means that applications which are not possible before, like remote surgery, that is now very much possible. The latency in 5G networks is very, very low. So you're talking about a latency of less than 5 milliseconds. And the connection density in 1 square kilometer radius, you can actually have 1 million devices connected to the internet. So that's the capacity that it is offering. And one very important dimension is that 5G follows security by design principles. So a lot of security is actually baked into 5G, and I'm going to talk about this in my subsequent slides. Next slide, please. Now, if you just look at how 5G can have an impact on industry, while we've seen adoption picking up in US and Europe, especially in the manufacturing segment, healthcare. In fact, a remote surgery took place using a 5G network, where a surgeon who could not actually come to the operating theater, using a 5G network, he was giving step-by-step instruction to the surgeon in the operating theater to be able to operate on somebody. 5G with cloud gaming, connected cars. A lot of the cars today are now powered by 5G telematic devices. Use cases for 5G in agriculture. Use cases for 5G in smart city kind of applications. In fact, in India, L&T actually has worked on a project with in Pune, where all the CCTV cameras are now sending their video feeds on a 5G network to a command and control center, and they are actually now analyzing all the video feeds, and that way definitely helps in handling crime in a city, right? So a lot of these applications where we are seeing 5G being used now. Now, as we start seeing 5G adoption picking up in all these areas, you really need to have very strong security in place, right? So security intelligence. Next slide, please. So how do you address 5G security? This is a very, very busy slide because when you look at 5G security, one has to look at the horizontal security, that is at a network level. In 5G, you can do what is called network slicing, where one physical network is, you can actually have virtual slices in a physical network, right? So you can have one slice for one particular application. You can have one slice for one particular industry. The need to have application level security, confidentiality and integrity protection. So, and 5G uses what is called service-based architecture, right? So here, what's different between 5G and 4G and the previous generations is that in 5G, we are using a lot of cloud native applications, right? So a lot of orchestration and control is actually run through software, right? So 4G has been very hardware heavy. In 5G, you're trying to virtualize a lot of network functions. So all of y'all are aware of how this whole virtualization of hardware picked up about a decade back, right? So you recollect how VMware were the first to virtualize your servers, your hardware, you have these virtual machines running on a single server and all that. So that way it reduces the cost of deployment of hardware that is needed in any data center or a enterprise. So in 5G, what you're doing is you're actually virtualizing a lot of network functions. So what was very hardware capex heavy is now driven a lot more by software, right? So you can virtualize a lot of network functions. And in this context, I just wanted to tell you about how mobile networks, when you look at the mobile network, you can kind of divide it into four logical parts, okay? So you have the radio access network. The radio access network is from your phone, you're using your radio access to connect to the nearest base station, right? So you have all these base stations. Then you have what is called the core network. So all these base stations have to connect to a core network of the operator. Then you're using transport network to connect these base stations. That's why you use fiber and microwave and all that. And then you have what is called interconnect network. Interconnect network is one operator has to connect his 5G network to another 5G network, right? So if you're on Airtel, you would obviously want to connect to a Jio and all that, right? So that's called the interconnect network. Now, every network part, it kind of comprises of three planes, okay? And each of this is responsible for carrying a type of traffic. So for example, you have what is called control plane, which manages the signaling traffic that is needed. The second thing is called the user plane, which carries the payload, which is the actual data that is going from a user or from an enterprise. And the third one is the management plane, which carries all the management traffic. So in terms of network security, what is important is that all three planes, which I talked about, it can be exposed to different types of threats. And the threats can affect all three planes simultaneously. And what 3GPP is third generation partnership program, they built the standards for 5G. GSM used to do it for 2G. The 3GPP standards, they provide very strong security mechanisms, which are based on the old 4G technology, but it has added a lot more enhancements in 5G. And those enhancements are in the area of encryption, authentication, and user privacy. So pretty much all traffic that is going on the 5G network today is encrypted. Okay. So there is security baked into pretty much all these boxes that you see, whether you look at devices and gateways, whether you look at access and network, whether you look at application and cloud infra, and when they look at ID management for users, right? So this is a slide which will probably take me 10 minutes to explain, but given the constraints of time, I'm just restricting myself to just kind of cover how you address security for 5G at a horizontal level as well as at a vertical level. Next slide, please. Now, having covered 5G, let me talk about how do you address IoT, right? Because IoT is a lot more complex, because in an IoT network, you have IoT endpoints. So you have an endpoint like a machine or a car, where you're going to use an IoT powered device that plugs into the asset, right? And that IoT device would have the required sensors to measure temperature, humidity, vibration. You'll have a network module that will need to connect to a network. It could be Wi-Fi, it could be cellular. The second thing is you also have to secure the network. So you spoke about encryption of data in motion, encryption of data at rest. So while the traffic is going through the network, you obviously have to encrypt that. So connectivity becomes important. And then, of course, you're going to secure the data and applications residing on the cloud. And while you secure endpoint, while you secure connectivity and the data application, very, very important to have a threat management layer to detect and respond. And that's where your AI and machine learning comes in. And I just wanted to give you the example of what AT&T used to do. So AT&T is one of the biggest networks in the world. On an average, AT&T used to handle about almost 500 petabytes of traffic per day. 500 petabytes. I don't know how many zeros are there in the petabytes, but 500 petabytes of traffic. And imagine when you're dealing with humongous amount of traffic, you really need to ensure that you're not just protecting your own network, but protecting the network of your customers as well, right? So you need to constantly monitor traffic going on your network. You also need to do some correlation with network data coming from other sources. And that's where you actually are able to build a kind of a data lake. And that's where you're able to do run AI and machine learning. And the whole premise is trying to get to a stage where you can predict a threat from occurring. That way you can take corrective action immediately. Next slide, please. Now, if you just look at the endpoint, the IoT endpoint, which is the IoT device, that's the weakest link in the chain. Because if you're able to compromise the IoT device, then you can really create havoc, right? because that IoT device, which is plugged into physical assets, that is like a gateway to get into any organization's network. And if you just look at how the IoT devices have evolved over the years, earlier these IoT devices never had an operating system, very little processing power, designed for a specific purpose. Today, if you just look at an IoT device, it has got an operating system, very high processing power, high bandwidth, and so on. So there are two important aspects when you look at how do you secure an IoT device. The first thing is that you got to have a mix of both hardware and software security. So you can have an encrypted SIM that can be soldered on the network module. So you can't actually physically remove that SIM. So that is one way by which you can ensure you can add additional security there. Second thing that you can do is you can use what is called the trusted platform module in a trusted execution environment. So that's another step that you can do. The other thing which you can also do is that you can have bidirectional authentication between the device and the network. So the device has to authenticate itself to the network also authenticate the device, right? So these are the kind of things that you can do as far as the device is concerned. But one very important thing which I wanted to share is when you want to protect the endpoint, it is extremely critical to get your device certified. There are organizations who do device certifications, and there is a cost of doing a device certification, and it's extremely important that vendors who make these devices, even if it means extra cost to get it certified, they have to do it. Because today, one of the barriers for IoT adoption not picking up as much as it should is because of cybersecurity. And if you have a device that is secure from both the hardware and software standpoint, if you have a device that is certified, that gives a lot more confidence to the end user to use those devices on a production environment. Next slide, please. Now, having talked about the device, securing the device, how do you secure the network, right? So from the endpoint to the internet, there are ways by which you can secure you can encrypt the traffic. You can run a private VPN on that, right? So in a cellular network, you use what is called private access point name. So like how you use a VPN to connect to a corporate network, on a cellular network, you can set up something like that. And that way traffic goes only through that tunnel, right? So then you also have connectivity management platforms which manage connectivity. They give you additional level of security, right? So there's a lot that you can do in terms of how data is going from an endpoint to the network by doing all this. Next slide, please. Next slide. Right. Now, once you have the data on a cloud, there are a lot of tools that one can use, right? So all of you all are familiar with this. So a network-based firewall, you can use DDoS defense, manage intrusion detection and prevention, data loss and prevention, right? So you need actually to use a combination of all these tools to really provide an additional level of security, because all of you all would agree that I don't think any organization can say that they are 100% secure, right? In security is all about risk management, and how do you minimize risk is what an organization should strive for, right? But by using a combination of all these tools on the cloud, securing a device, securing the network, that way you minimize the risk. Next slide, please. I'm just coming to the end, and here I just wanted to share that. So while we talked about the challenges that we're facing from cybersecurity perspective, it is extremely important for organizations to tie security to business objectives and outcome, because security is to be discussed at a CEO level, at the board level, and as someone mentioned earlier, that at an individual level also it's our responsibility to make sure that we follow what is called cyber security hygiene. So just as we follow personal hygiene, one needs to follow cyber security hygiene, which means that not clicking on those phishing mails, making sure that you use your proper antivirus software in your PC, on your phone, and all that. And one has to move away from ROI metrics. You can't say that it's going to cost me so much to implement cybersecurity, because if the damage is done, even if you're attacked, and if it's known to the public, then obviously it takes a long time to repair that damage, right? So credibility gets affected. It's a shared responsibility model for all employees. Set the tone of the top, as I mentioned, right? And one needs to obviously assess risks for business adaptability. This is something which is an ongoing journey. You cannot say that, okay, I've implemented it and I'm done. This has to be done. It is always going to be a journey, just as how digital transformation is a journey and not an end state. Constantly assessing risk becomes important. And my last slide, I just want to end with the final thought. Last slide, please. That security is not a business problem. It is a technology problem. Sorry, security is a business problem. It is not a technology problem. And when I say security is a business problem, it means that uh, everyone, and it starts with the leadership and getting all employees, all of them aligned to the vision of the organization, which is making sure that you have a robust, secure environment, and that gives a lot more confidence to your end users. So, on that note, I would like to end. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sunil, for the wonderful insights. We do have received a lot of queries from the attendees, so I would flash that in a minute. This one we have for what are the major industries which face ransom attacks, and are there particular kinds of ransom attacks?
So let me take this one up.
Yeah.
See, when you talk about, I think all of us have already quite in detail mentioned about this. Maybe, 5 years back, BFSI was a sector which, and the global MNCs were the sectors which were majorly hit by this ransomware attacks. But in last 3 to 4 years, I think it has broken that myth that it will not happen to us, right? That false sense of, security has gone. Today, you talk about maybe a pharma industry, a BFSI, a mid-sized manufacturing, or a SME industry. Everyone has got hit. So for me, I would no more categorize into the major industries today. Anyone who has data, who is working from home, who has all these devices, who is connected to 5G, is going to get a ransomware attack. So that's my take. I think I've answered it from my side.
Whomsoever has a weakened security will get attacked, right? So nothing specific. It's a industry agnostic, I would say.
Today, everyone
Healthcare
is the
is,
target.
yeah, healthcare is something I think they need to be very careful of. We might have heard of the aims, right? So which
Yeah,
went down.
Ames is where they did.
Yeah. So yeah.
Even the
Another
utility
question.
segment, utilities, power utility, they have also been attacked a lot. Um, so these could be state-sponsored attacks, actually.
In
Correct.
fact, while doing our research, also we came across one news of China where they were developing a particular drug vaccine, and at that instance and at that place also they have attacks. Cyber, there were multiple cyber attacks, and now even in the R&D sections of the healthcare industry, China government is employing proper cyber attack softwares. Another question that we have for Nilesh is ki how to differentiate between the mails, whether they are considered as phishing mails or not.
So there are many ways, I would say, right? So the subject line of the email, you can just have a watch on it, right? If you have got a phishing email, right? So you can see the sender, right? You can see the to section whether it has been generalized, right? The subject line, right, and the content within that. Even though if you are asked to click on the link, just move the cursor around it. Do not click on it, and you will get to see about it. Try to directly go to that link rather than just clicking on that, right? So in that way you can just have a proper security in terms of phishing attacks. Yeah.
And just,
Okay.
I think, adding to that, when you talk about the phishing mails, and I'd also like to give a little detail on the next one or two questions related to this. Uh, it targets two things. One is your fear, and one is your excitement. So let's understand the objective. How they're entering our minds, right? So in case you get some mails where they're saying that, "Arey, हमने तो lottery win कर लिया," or for that shopping and all of that. That is one trap. The other trap, of course, is maybe your CEO is mailing you. Okay, so the first thing is your objective. Second thing is, a lot of times we may not be able to see this, but then from which email ID have we got this, and to which email ID. For example, a lot of times I get a CEO mail, in my personal email ID. Now, why will my CEO not mail me on my office ID then on my personal ID? So that's another way to look at it. The third point is the writing DNA style. How usually, when your seniors or someone whom when they are mailing you, how they usually do it. But see, sometimes, Himanshu, what happens also is because of the social engineering and targeted attacks, it may not be possible for users like us to get that visibility. That's the reason tools are also there. right? Because they will have those automated BC, business email of compromise kind of indicators, who can check this writing DNA style and help us out. Yeah, that's it.
Sunil, would you like to
ChatGPT,
add something to it?
ChatGPT can also be used to generate those phishing mails, which makes it even more
Correct.
I do have one very interesting question related to ChatGPT for you only, Sunil. I was reading somewhere this thing that AI tools like ChatGPT or Bard AI can be used to develop different kinds of malware. How can organization prepare themselves from these kinds of attacks? You did mention about all these kinds of softwares for developing content in your presentation as well.
This is a tough one because the ChatGPT is generating these kind of phishing mails and even developing malware. So I think it boils down to getting your basics right, Himanshu. I think making sure that you have proper access controls, and as someone mentioned, defense in depth strategy. Security at every layer. I think that's going to be important. Securing your endpoints, securing the traffic going through the network, and if you're having application in the cloud, securing that. Again, when you talk about cloud security, it's going to be a shared responsibility. Enterprise would have to play its part. The cloud provider has to play its part. So I think it needs a very holistic approach. You have to address security at all these layers. Otherwise, it's going to be very, very difficult. In terms of, one is to detect a threat, because APTs are so common. Once you have an attack, and if you're not even sure that an attack has taken place, the time to detect one takes a long time, right? So it really needs a very holistic approach. Addressing security at multiple layers is what I would have to say, using all the tools and process, all those that are needed. uh, Himanshu.
Okay. So, Prashant, would you like to something to that?
One is like the automating the, it can be, let's say, a 0 day attack, right? Let's say someone comes with new sort of a malware. In that case, doing the enrichment at the earliest stage using automation can actually work well, and also collaborating with other organizations as well, getting the right amount of feeds. Even though if you have a malware, but at the end of the day it will be coming from some malicious feed or something, so make sure to collaborate with the right vendors as well, so who will keep posting the right amount of feeds. Yeah.
Okay, so coming back to the phishing attacks only, Nilesh, there is another question about the increasing number of phishing attacks from social media platforms such as Telegram, Instagram, and WhatsApp. So, how to keep yourself safe from these kinds of attacks?
So as rightly articulated by Harsh, right? So we just need to see for the luring message, right? And then we need to validate the individual who has sent that particular email is whether can send that kind of email or not, right? If that person is seem to be a known, right, you can directly call to them and then just check, right, what is the things all about he or she has sent on email, right? That is one thing. You will also get to see sense of some urgency, right? Like you have to do it right now, you don't have time or things like that. So within the phishing also we have a different type of phishing or wishing, right? Wishing is nothing but getting a call or messages on your cell phone, right? Phishing is something you get on your email, right? So we need to differentiate. We need to have, we cannot cover all the points, right? What all things can be covered as part of that. But at the high level we just need to be suspectful for all the emails we are receiving in our email. Just try to validate the sender, the subject, the action being asked to take, and based on that we need to take the decisions, right? Rather than we just need to be in a hurry and not click on the link, right? So that is what I would say for now.
Okay. Uh, Due to time constraint, we do not answer all the questions, but I would like to focus on this one. For you, Sunil, this is directed directly at you. That do you think that a regulated cybersecurity standard in 5G IoT devices will be available in the future?
Yeah, actually, it's work in progress. So 3GPP, which I talked about, which works on standards for 5G, they come up with new releases. So the next release is release 17, and as they come up with these new releases, as 5G networks get a lot more proliferated across countries, uh, the security standards will obviously get a lot more enhanced. And so that is already work in progress. It's already happening right now as we speak.
Okay, so thank you everyone. We have covered a lot of ground today, from the current trends and challenges in cybersecurity to the best practices and standards for protecting networks and data, even to the emerging technologies and solutions for enhancing cybersecurity. I would like to thank our distinguished speakers and audience for joining us today. Have a good day, guys.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Had a wonderful time. Thank you.